I thought my dream job was I wanted to be a brand manager at Nike. And here I was as a brand manager at a different company in fitness and working for Nike as a trainer, which was not like, and for other brands as a trainer. And I was like, oh, that's just so interesting. And there came a crossroad in my career where the company I worked for said they were doing a deal with a Nike competitor and they said I had to sign with this other brand for 5 years and leave Nike. And I was like, no, like I can't. I doesn't feel right. Like I don't want to do that. And their advice to me was they're like, you're gonna go nowhere with Nike. And I said, but I just might. And like I owe it to myself to find out because I'd started to hop on that train, of like you say, like the right path that I was going on. And I remember at the time people like, dude, you are just going into risky decision to risky decision. And the craziest thing was a year later, I was the face of Nike Woman, like this young girl from New Zealand, thick accent. And I truly believe that got accelerated me getting there because someone told me that it wasn't going to happen. And I chose to respond by saying, but it just might.
Kirsty, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Um, who are you? Where are you? And what do you do?
I'm Kirsty Godso. I'm currently in Los Angeles, but I'm from New Zealand, if you can't pick it up in the accent. And I'm a Nike global trainer and the founder of Made of Protein.
Excellent. And so, how does one become a Nike global trainer? Because that sounds very impressive.
Honestly, this is like a funny story because I always tell people, they're like, how can I get noticed by Nike? And I'm like, guys, I got noticed by Nike down in New Zealand, which people still think is part of Australia. So if I can get noticed down there, like I promise you, if you're doing the right thing, you can get noticed too. But a Nike global trainer, we have about 30 of us around the world, and we all have a slightly different role. As I'm based in the US, so in the North America team, I have a pretty unique role where I've been with Nike 11 years. So I oversee anything from like our trainers to the training workouts that we film on the Nike Training Club app, which is free, by the way, if you don't have it. And, we'll be on photo shoots. We work with media, we work with athletes. And then I also work on strategy. So it's really fun. It's a lot of fitness, but it's also a lot about like, okay, what are we projecting for fitness for the next 3 years? Like, how are we communicating to different audiences? What are we doing about children in fitness? And yeah, it's fun. It's really fulfilling.
Excellent. Well, that's congratulations for having a fulfilling job. That is an accomplishment in life that many of us strive for sometimes decades, so that must be a good feeling. You go do something you really love.
I know. I mean, I had to study a double business degree first to go in the complete opposite direction and just dive right into fitness. But I would say my marketing degree definitely helps me out. My finance degree less so. But yeah, it's much more exciting for me to be, working with bodies than it was to be sitting in front of a lot of computer screens, unfortunately, even though I probably would have made more money in the other direction.
Certainly. Well, it's money makes for comfort from moment to moment sometimes, but a life is an accumulation of moments, and sometimes it's a little bit of discomfort that makes it even more rewarding at the end of the day. So, and there's a certain amount of discomfort that probably goes into everyday life when you're a professional fitness person. You got to kind of embrace the pain a little bit sometimes.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's funny because there's this real like idea that trainers are just always working out. By the way, some trainers are like that's their entire thing, especially with the way that, anyone can make an app now or anything like that. But I'm definitely a trainer that's still seeing 4 clients back to back before I then train myself. And let me tell you how bad my energy is when I go into my workout. Like I really have to dig deep, probably look at some of your social media posts to kick my ass into gear and be like, okay, you could do this workout. And honestly, sometimes my workouts are 20 minutes or something, and I'm like, sure, that's it today. But then there'll be other days where you're filming 5 workouts back to back for a training app or something. And you're like, whoa, you've really got to work on your internal dialogue to get through the fourth and fifth one.
Yeah. So anybody that's undertaken the initiative to train or become physically fit, there's a lot of our motivation out there is I want to look better or be healthier, get in shape, etc. That's a certain type of motivation, but you have to go beyond that and you have to go beyond that and find a way to connect with other people also.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest things that I always say to Nike or anyone else. I'm like, I can train anyone to be an amazing trainer, but I can't train someone to have a great personality and I can't train them to care. So those are two things that I'm really looking for also when I'm identifying talent or people that like I think I would want on my personal team or like maybe that we might recruit for Nike or something because the art of being a personal trainer or a group fitness person or a health coach of any aspect is you got to be so patient. You really have to care so much about others instead of it's not just about yourself. And there has to be a deep motivation that is beyond just this aesthetic goal, right? Because you're really curbing behaviors. And for me, like I train a lot of girls in their early 20s at my private clients. And I like that because it's such an interesting age, right? You can really like go in any direction around that point. Life can seem super overwhelming, especially, we're in LA, they're young Hollywood. And like, what I love is that I see so many of the disciplines that we talk about in the gym, like really transfer into so many areas of these other girls' lives. So even if I'm filming classes for Nike or for my own platform, I try and keep that messaging going through into workouts. So at least if someone's spending 30 minutes with me doing a workout, hopefully they leave with some mental like motivation beyond just like having got through that set of exercises.
Does having to when you get these new clients, particularly at that age of life where they're, the world and your future are nothing but opportunities when you're 20 years old. And so working with those people, does that help change your perspective?
Yeah, I think in a way I definitely feel old. No, it
Welcome to
makes,
the club.
yeah. I think sometimes it helps like sometimes I think we're so non-cognizant of the progress we've made or like the growth that's happened or the lessons we've gone through and like what the point of them was. Like anytime something difficult's happening to me, I'm like, okay, like what's the lesson here? Because I don't want to miss it because as much as I'm really annoyed right now or I'm frustrated or I feel like I'm running into a wall, like there's some learning curve happening that probably I'm going to be able to apply again later on or I can help someone else with. So I think having like younger clients and listening to maybe some of the things they're coming up against or the thoughts that they're having and just being like, oh, like I've totally been there, don't worry about it. And it's nice to be able to, be a set of ears for them to listen, but also give a bit of guidance with some texture and like usually like a relatable story and be like, oh yeah, that definitely happened to me. And because I think it's hard for, young people these days, they're growing up so different with social media than we did. So things often there's so much sensory overload that I think everything's way more overwhelming. It's like it's really hard to escape. Like I grew up on a farm in New Zealand where there was barely any cell service. So like for me, it was like escape is all I knew. I was like, great. I like, I get up, I like feed my animals. I go catch a school bus for 2 hours to get to school. And I'm not, we weren't on Instagram. I think Facebook came out during my last year of high school and I didn't even get it for like another 2 years after that. So I was like, oh, this thing seems weird, but now it's like kids know how to work Instagram, TikTok, like all these savvy things often before they're even 10 years old, which is crazy.
It is. I mean, it's so hard to be a young person. It's hard to be a teenager. That just day one by itself, everything going on inside of you and learning like the social structure that you're being part of. Being a teenager and even adolescence to a certain degree. It's like you're practicing being an adult. You're making some adult decisions, but for most people, certainly there are people with very difficult life situations. But for the average person, they get to make some adult decisions, but they still have kind of a safety net underneath them of their family structure or whatever. And I look back at being a teenager and was like, it's a blessing that I'm here. I might not have made it. It was like I was so crazy and so stupid in those days. I have a lot of sympathy for younger people in navigating that and finding the right path through it. But I also came from a very rural area where there wasn't a whole lot to do. There wasn't that huge sensory experience that we all deal with these days. And I can't even imagine the challenges it takes to go to look at that, look at yourself, look at your actual social life in real life, look at the world around you. Young people have got a lot of decisions to make now.
Yeah, and I think there's so much like just so much experience that's happening under public viewing. And my biggest hope is always, especially for my clients or like anyone young, I'm like, I just hope they get to have some like unfiltered like fun and like growing up and like all the experiences that they deserve, because it's like those moments that get to really shape you. I think that kids are almost like kids and teenagers and young people in their 20s, young adults, like they're almost like advancing too fast, and I'm like, like don't forget to have fun and like just do all the things that you should do before everything is such a pressure situation. But at the same time, I also know some of these kids where I'm like, I might start working with someone when they're 18, and I'm speaking to them. We have a huge age gap between us, and our conversation is so like, and our friendship is so fulfilling that it actually feels like we're much closer in age. And I'm just blown away by their drive and like their experience and like their work ethic and manners, like already at that age and in such a high pressure scenario. So I think, there's the pros and cons of it all, and like how much, I feel like we're just in the age of information now where it's like you can get anything. I don't know if you remember this. This is like a funny throwback thought, but remember when you'd find an image on Tumblr and you would have no idea who it was or like what brand it was. And then you would just really try and scour the internet on your bad internet connection, hoping that maybe you would ever find this product or something. And then they probably wouldn't ship to New Zealand, but like it was the fun of the search. It was the thrill of it. Whereas now it's like, it's almost like things aren't that exciting because we can just get it, and it's like, I miss that real feeling of like wanting something and wanting something so bad. And I think that's what I love about fitness, because yes, okay, there's shortcuts people can take, like supplements, Ozempic, all these horrible things, but if you really want to be in the gym and really craft a mindset and a body and like this overall sense of health, like you got to be in the gym and you got to be working on it. And you also got to be doing your diligent steps outside of the gym. And yeah, it's just, I think that's what I love about it. Like you really, it's this wonderful thing that you can do for yourself. And like, you can't, I don't know, you can cheat it a little bit, but you can't cheat it too much.
Absolutely. And it's such a primitive reward whenever you've exhausted yourself, the serotonin, the dopamine, all those things that you're getting out of that experience, and the little aches and pains, but the strength that you feel as a result of it. It's such a unique experience. I know for myself, like I'm built like a Neanderthal. Like I'm in kind of decent shape, but I'm really broad, and got a heavy bone structure. And so I hate cardio, but I do it. I do cardio. I get on the treadmill. I do it. And when I get off, I'm drenched in sweat, just in spite of most smaller framed people would probably not even be breathing heavy with what drenches me in sweat, because it's so much work to move this frame around. And a lot of times lately I'll sit down on the bench and rest. I'm covered in sweat. I'm dripping with sweat. It's like somebody dunked me in water. And I just think like this is a reward in life it's so personal. It's such a strange accomplishment to sit there and feel good because you're drenched in sweat and you feel a little bit proud of yourself that you were able to push yourself to get there. And you can't get that any other way in life besides making that decision to force yourself to go do that really unpleasant thing.
I love that you said it's so personal, because that was something that I was thinking in my head, is like people forget that fitness is such a personal experience. Like we might go to group fitness, but you're still having a personal moment, right? But that's where it gets messy when we set goals. And I think where often people don't find that self-pride you're talking about, or just like pat themselves on their back a little bit, is because they sort of get caught up in the mirror image of someone else, or an image or whatever, they like some type of body type they might want. And like one of the biggest things I always say to people is, you have this personal architecture. There's going to be things that can change, things that can't, like anatomically, just, how are your hips set, different things. But it's up to you to really decide, like, if you would like to make the best out of what you can for your body and really be on that journey and be proud of it, rather than always feeling like watching someone else's body and watching that and being disappointed in yourself, because it doesn't, it's not fulfilling in that sense. And I've also said to people too, I'm like, there is no point in getting the body of your dreams if you don't have the mind to match it, because you won't see yourself. And that's especially what we see with a lot of like women with, increased body dysmorphia. And I know it's a big issue for men as well. So I always try and say to people, I'm like, when you get into this habit of making yourself feel really good through exercise, if the first thing you could scan is like, how do I feel versus like, how do I look, and trying to go via that, because it's positively leading you in the right direction to like attach that mindset to those healthy habits and those routines and those disciplines you've put in place, rather than being like, well, I didn't see abs straight away, so like, what a waste of time, rather than, what it's like when you've had such a stressful day and you go and you work out at the gym and it's sort of just like, it drips out, like it just sort of evaporates a little bit and you think clearer and you're like, oh man, that was like a total sanity check.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something in our the ancient part of our early human minds that's saying, wow, I just survived some really horrible thing. Life must not be too bad. Like I outrun the saber-toothed tiger in 45 minutes. So it's time to enjoy life a little bit.
It's funny because I know a lot of people hate high intensity, but it is something early on in my career, especially, is what I specialized in. And what I always loved about high intensity was the mindset you go into, because it is so challenging, especially if you're doing true HIIT, where you're really pushing your heart rate around the 85% plus mark. And you're getting these super short specific recoveries. And you're just like, I don't know what I've got left in this 30-minute thing. And like, now that she wants me to do what. And you get the craziest epoch high afterwards where you're just in total euphoria. And that's the really addictive part, the high intensity, as well as you can get great results. Granted, if you do it, in the right dosage, right? So this is the thing. We get addicted to things very quickly. We want to chase that feeling. But what I've always loved about high intensity is that mental challenge. It is so much more. Yes, there's a huge physical component, but it's when you want to break and you're like, I know my recovery is in 10 seconds, but I want to break right now. And you have to be like, well, I'm going to be pretty pissed off about that later on if I break early. So that's what I always loved about it, is I felt like you got to shift people's mindsets so much more, as well as you obviously like taking their health up so many notches. But you can see it in people's eyes. You can see in a class too. And I'd always be on people like, I don't want to see you stop. No premature recoveries. Like, come on. I'm like, stay with it. You're going to feel so much better about it afterwards. But we commonly hear, even as you said earlier, people hate cardio. And I think cardio is confronting in a different way than strength, right? Strength, we can feel pretty grunty. We can push through our reps, but cardio, especially if you're on something like a run and you are just stuck with your mind. Like usually for me, I want to end a run because I'm bored, not because I'm tired, because I'm bored, which
That's a goal I would love to reach someday.
Yeah, but it's like, I'm like, oh, I'm bored. Like, okay, how can I make this more enjoyable for myself? Like, can I go on like a mental adventure right now and somehow, or it's like people don't like cardio because they think it's hard or they think it's mundane, because it's not as distracting sometimes as, you're in the gym, you're doing a lateral lunge into a press or something, your brain's got to think about different things. You're activating stability, but cardio also serves an important part of this like mental cleansing and,
Yeah, it's interesting, like you talk about that 10 seconds. Because my time is limited at the gym, I like really when I'm on the treadmill, I'm on an incline the entire time. And when I'm running, I'm on an incline, and it's really, really hard for me. And it's hard for me psychologically. I dread it so much. When I first started getting serious about being at the gym every time, I had to go through this long process of I literally, when I started out, I literally would say, okay, I don't want to go to the gym. I should go to the gym. And what I'm about to say is the absolute truth. This is what I went through. It's going to sound ridiculous. It's going to sound like I'm making it up. I promise this was my mindset. I would sit there and say, well, I'll just put my sweats on. I'm sitting on the couch. Like, I'll put my sweats on. That's not much of a challenge with that. I go put my sweats on. I'd sit there for a few more minutes and say, well, I already got the sweats on, maybe I'll just go, I'll just drive to the gym, I'll just get up and drive to the gym. if there's too many people there, or, if I'm not feeling it when I get there, I can leave. I don't have to stay there. I can just turn around the parking lot and go home. I'd go drive to the gym. Sometimes I would turn around, but sometimes I wouldn't. And, I would literally stop. I would say, well, I'll go in. I don't really have to do anything. Like maybe I'll just walk for a little while on the treadmill. That's all I have to do. Park, go in, walk for a little while on the treadmill. It's like, well, I'm already walking. I'm already on a treadmill. I'll run for a few minutes. And I went through that process for months of overcoming my pathetic, lazy ass and just slowly but surely tricking myself in there and breaking down those barriers and desensitizing myself to that physical stress that I was trying to avoid. And then eventually I just got to the point where it's like, I got to go, and I'm impatient to go, and I'm impatient to take days where know I need to rest and that sort of thing. And I'm telling you, it is such a difficult game to play with yourself. Those 10 seconds, if you want to understand the like relativity of time, it happens on a treadmill watching a clock. Like those few seconds you will never notice in your life. You will
Yeah.
have thousands and thousands of those few seconds periods that you never know will pass. But the ones on the treadmill, oh, they go so slow.
I know, it's anything staring straight at a clock. I always find like quite hard, in that sort of working scenario. I think even with my cardio workouts, that's why I like mix things up. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this weighted jump rope for 45 seconds, then I'm getting on the curved treadmill and I'm running for 30 seconds, then I'm getting off and I'm slamming balls for 20 seconds or something, and it's like, it's because it's distracting, right? You're getting through it because you always know there's something next coming. But when you're just on that incline on the treadmill, you're like, oh my God, this is just taking forever. And what I'm getting out of this. But even how you spoke through that routine of how you would get yourself to the gym, it's like, even if that's the process that someone listening, like that's how they're going to get themselves there, that is just so much better than like not even driving to the parking lot. I know there's all those like cheesy things like, oh, you just got to get there and then you'll do something. I think what I've noticed has helped people is I'm like, how do I want to feel today? Is it just like, it doesn't have to be that you did the most. It can be just that you went and you did something. There's all this science behind exercise snacking, which is only like 10 minutes of doing something, and how it all adds up. And I always specifically tell that to people that get stuck with really crazy desk jobs and they're always feeling down on themselves, because they feel like they're not getting enough done. So, you're like, well, did you walk to get your coffee at least in the morning? Did you take a couple of phone calls, like walking, even if it's pacing around the office, or what happened, this and this? And there's so many ways that we can do what might feel like the bare minimum, but you have no idea like how quickly that starts to at least build up in your body and your mental, where you're like, your body wants to move. It wants to feel well. And I think the more you act in that favor, it like keeps steering you in that direction, like it doesn't have to be crazy discipline. It doesn't have to be psychotic behaviors. Like that's also unhealthy on another spectrum. But it's like, if you can have enough of those positive moments that sort of steer you, like it starts to like, I feel like your brain goes up, it's like, instead of assuming maybe the worst, or assuming like, I'm going to get to the car park and turn around, you're like, I'm assuming I'm getting to the car park. I'm probably getting the park I want. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get on the treadmill I want to. And then here we go. I'm back on my shitty incline run, but I made it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the other thing to keep in mind. I don't know, like I've always found it really hard to trick myself the way other people talk about tricking themselves into doing things. Like I outsmart myself every time I try to trick myself. But with this one thing, I really was able to, and I think that it was because I think ultimately we are so adaptable. We acclimate to things way easier than we think we do. And once the mind becomes acclimated, the body can follow it almost anywhere. And so that slowly but surely you desensitize yourself to the things that you don't like in life, even if it's not just going to the gym, but it's dealing with responsibility or addressing an unhealthy relationship or all sorts of things like that. The most important part of it is looking in yourself honestly, looking at your situation honestly, sitting down at those quiet times, not avoiding the thoughts, not distracting yourself from it, whatever it is, really thinking about it. And the second you start doing that, you're on the path to improving whatever that situation is.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, we can't positively just like outthink some of the realities that unfortunately exist in our brains. And, like our brains move so quickly. And you know what it's like when you get into a state of overwhelm and you feel like it's going side to side, like you're in a pickleball game or something with your thoughts. But I completely agree with you. It's finding this almost like a bit of an audit of the mind and learning those traits. I know most successful business people are always like, do the hardest and most important task first thing in the morning. I'm like, but wait, I can't because I'm with clients like back to back. And if I want to do that, I have to get up even earlier. So I think my personal rule that I always did was I'm like, okay, what's the best that I can do in this situation in terms of like, whenever I'm trying to honor something. And also if I have the opportunity to act on something immediately, I do it immediately. Like if there is something I can deal with that's going to pop up and be an annoying task later or an annoying conversation later, if I can have it now, let me have it now, even if it feels uncomfortable, I want to get it out of my system. And you never know, maybe it's getting it out of someone else's system too. But yeah, I try to employ those rules with myself. And I find the more that I actually stay on them and follow them, I get really positive momentum from it. And then before you know it, and we all have our own little unique things. And I think that's what's so relatable with the posts that you guys do on the social media account, because there'll always be a line that hits someone, and it might be one of the big posts, and like a line might hit you differently to another line hits me, and you just feel you're like, oh, it's like your aha moment of the day. And I think a lot of your posts really carry over to the motivation, like with exercise specifically, but just motivation beyond it. The motivation shouldn't be super separate. Everything is really connected.
The fastest growing part of our audience in the past couple of years has been people in fitness, and particularly ladies in fitness. And it's I like to think that I like to think that I'm writing from I may get in trouble with saying this, but I like to think that I'm writing from a place of healthy masculinity, and from my whole life, people have always been like, "Oh, you'd be a good dad." I got like a dad thing going on, and so I think that a healthy voice from a father is one that is very, very honest but loving. And so you're telling somebody something that's really difficult, but you're telling them in such a way that they understand that you're burdened by the fact that you have to communicate this to them. And I don't know, there's something about that that makes people want to go work out harder. And I don't know what it is, to be honest with you.
Sometimes it just feels like you're never really getting like the brunt of the truth that you need. Like my dad is a Scorpio, so I actually get that. I sometimes I scream at him, but I'm always really grateful because it's exactly what you were saying. It's like loving, stern advice. And I'm like, damn it, he's right. Like, and yeah, I think it's refreshing because we so often like everyone's so busy trying to be PC or not be offensive. I mean, there's definitely a lot of trolls on the internet, but think about the people that you usually get sound counsel from. Sometimes you don't get that good dose of honesty or not in the right degree that you need it.
Yeah.
And also, I think because we don't get vulnerable enough to tell people what we're really thinking and feeling inside. So when we read something that comes from an outside source, we're like, shit, that's actually me. I'm lying too.
Yeah, that vulnerability is no matter who we're talking to, the subject of social media is just going to like arise in our conversations just because it's so prevalent in our lives. And that the idea of vulnerability is so weird when it comes to social media, because there's really two sides to it. On the one hand, it takes a lot of work to put an authentic self in social media, and maybe you don't really want to do that, but it's inherently a superficial experience. But simultaneously, you can go too far in the other direction and be too vulnerable on social media because maybe that gets you more engagement or whatever. And so to the point where you're experiencing all that stuff on the outside a little bit more than you ought to. And it's a really weird road to walk whenever a lot of people start looking at you. And it's the one thing that I have to say, the thing that bothers me most with folks on the internet, and I guess maybe we're in troll territory. I don't know. I sincerely don't want to be discouraging to people, but the people that come into our post and say this is toxic, I don't appreciate that more than anything else, because at the end of the day, what it is a difficult thing to think about. And
Yeah.
we have to think about difficult things. Even if you disagree, you need to engage with the thought, understand why you disagree. Saying it's toxic is not thinking about it. Saying it's toxic is saying, I don't like that. Therefore, I'm giving this label that banishes it forever and ever. And it is a necessary step to growth, maturity, self-improvement to think about things that we don't like and we disagree with.
I mean, people don't like anything that triggers them, right? I think unfortunately with social media, everything that people see, they think is personal, and it's often not. And what might be offensive to them or toxic is actually helping thousands of other people, if not more, and it's just like you're saying, it's just school of thought. It's like, hey, this is actually a concept to think about and process. And if you don't want to process it, that's cool. Don't need to be here. I have a similar thing with, even if I post like my clients who work so hard doing something, and I'll get people just come straight underneath the right eating disorder, like anorexic, privilege, things like that. And I'm like, really? It could never just be hard work, huh? It couldn't be like commitment, discipline, anything. It just has to be a slander. And that's always a shame to me. And it's often why, like, I actually don't share a lot, especially of my clients on social media, because I'm very protective. But it always makes me sad that people feel like they need to scream their personal insecurity out at someone else. Like, I get it. We all have our triggers. We all have them. But especially in New Zealand, growing up there, it's like, we just don't, like, think before you speak is one of the biggest things you're sort of taught growing up. And I can't imagine personally going and writing things on the internet under other people's posts, even if I don't like something or it doesn't sit with me. It's just like, oh, it's not for me, and I think it's important to think about stuff, and it's important even to think about things that you don't necessarily agree with, because we have to teach our brain to accommodate other opinions and other thoughts. That's how we can all coexist together.
Right. Well, it's really important. If look, I don't spend a lot of time on social media because I kind of don't like it, but I look at posts. I want to respond. I see something and I have a thought about it and I want to respond. And sometimes that's an inflammatory thought. It's human nature in a lot of ways. But the way I usually sort of let go of that is I think this person's probably more complex than what they're putting out there. And I stop and think, yeah, I'm very complex. Like, this feeling that I'm having in response is very complex. It's built on a lifetime of experience. And maybe it's a response to something that happened to me in the recent days. Maybe it's a response to my blood sugar or the amount of caffeine that I have or the amount of
Yeah.
sleep that I've gotten. Maybe it's a response to something like my dad said when I was 8 years old, that, like, there's
Yeah.
so much that makes a person, and it's really necessary, not just on social media, but in life, you're participating with everybody else in the world on some level. And you've got to have empathy. You got to put yourself in their shoes, and the people you disagree with, it is more important to look from their perspective than anybody else in the world. You've got to do it.
Yeah, I think it's been one of the best things I did in the last year was more actively do therapy and understanding some of, like, maybe my inner child stuff, like you were saying. And I think that opened I always like to think I'm very, like, empathetic and, like, considerate of other people. But I've noticed, especially since I've been doing that additional work, how much more the first thing, like, even if someone says something to me that I don't like, even, if it's in person or on something, I have a bit more of a step back to give space to be like, is this because of, is there a bigger picture here? Or, and it really helps you with those interactions that might get catty really quickly, because you can have some understanding at least, or a bit more patience. But I love that you called it inflammatory. That's such a good description.
I use that word so much lately. And like, it's on the top of my head so much. Social media has done that to me. It's just like recognizing how quick things rub the wrong way and how bad. I mean, like in your body, like, it's something rubs you the wrong way, it irritates you. You don't address it. You don't think about it. It gets infected. It becomes an
Yeah.
illness. I mean, it happens with our social structures. But I have a question for you. you have such a pleasant air.
Good.
And yeah, there's something there's something very reassuring about your smile. And that's just a candid compliment. But I'm sitting here listening to you talk and hearing your thoughts, and I'm wondering something. Do you ever have to like kick ass, to get it out of people? Because I'm having a hard time imagining you doing that.
You know what is so funny is I think perhaps maybe there's like a different persona that kicks in when I'm a trainer because I am known for having the hardest workouts on the Nike app. And I think maybe it's a weird surprise because people like, she comes in so bubbly. And then before I know it, it's like a really brutal workout. And like, but she's talking to me about my mindset and like not like this and this, and I got to keep going. So I think definitely like at work, there's this mode that kicks in, but I'm definitely like in real life, I'm really bad with boundaries. So it takes me a while to get to the kick ass thing. But at the end of the day, I'm a double fire sign. So when it comes out, it happens. And it's I try and control it, but it happens. But usually I try to um keep things pretty happy and positive. And then unfortunately, if I have to bite, I have to bite. But that usually comes a little bit too late. And I've done some personal suffering in the meantime. But with my clients, especially like in the gym, I'll say like we have a fun experience. The most number one priority for me is I'm like, make them feel good. Like, let's get this work in. You're not here to mess around. You will not be on your phone while we're working out. And but we make the sessions fun. Like people always comment in the gym, they're like, why are you guys always laughing? Like I look over and you guys sometimes are like laughing so much you're crying. I'm like, I mean, fitness isn't that bad, guys. Like we're having a pretty good time in here. So I think being around positive energy in terms of helping people with their confidence definitely helps. And when you do that for so many hours of the day, I think it sort of keeps that vibrational frequency up a bit more, right? Like it's very tiring being a personal trainer because it's a big energy exchange all the time. But I think at least it's mostly a positive energy exchange, especially when you're working with a curated group of people. So I'm grateful for that. It does help me for the most part of the day.
There is a certain mindset that sometimes the most merciful thing you can do to somebody the most merciful thing you can do to somebody is challenge them the hardest that you possibly can. Because a lot of times, particularly young people, they need to learn about themselves. They need to find their own strength. They need to develop their own strength. They need to understand that it's their personal responsibility to use that strength, to apply it to their life, to go out and do what they're going to do in life. They got to do it for themselves. Nobody else is going to take responsibility for them. And that
No.
is not pleasant.
I kind of always call it an exfoliating of self, when you have to like rough people up a little bit because we need to like have those growth moments. And I personally will never be more thankful than when I've had those moments from people that were mentors or bosses of mine earlier in my career where you're like, you're almost terrified or you're like, because you haven't got your confidence up yet. You don't have all your years of experience and stuff, but those are the lessons you always remember the most.
Well,
So
yeah,
I
totally.
definitely I think I like being in the school of tough love because it's like I slightly gear towards like I like to have a slightly masochistic mindset of being like, okay, I got to earn this. No one else can give it to me. I have to earn it myself. I want to learn. I want to learn it right. I want to do it right. And I want to keep practicing until I continuously do it right.
Ultimately, people appreciate it. They get it. They always get it at the end of the day because what you've done is you've made you I don't. I never like to say that I made people stronger. I always like to say that I helped people find their strength, and they had to make themselves stronger, right? But at years later, they will always look back and say, "I'm strong," and I understand now that I couldn't have gotten strong unless I went through a really difficult experience, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Because I feel that way. I feel that way towards teachers and different adults and better emotionally developed people that I encountered in life who showed me that sort of stoic response and held me to responsibility for doing things, and it made me stronger. I look back and I felt gratitude for that, and there's a certain burden that comes along with that when you're in the moment, and you got to find the psychological pathway to get that person to do that extra thing that is so excruciating and frustrating, and they're stressed, and it's, it's burdensome in that moment, but you're motivated by something way bigger than that.
Yeah, it's more than the temporary like pleasure there of whatever you think you're missing out on, right? Like there has to be some self-monitoring.
Do
I think
you
like people get so averse to having I don't want to say struggle because it's like the wrong word, but it is about having that exposure to it not being so comfortable and it not being immediate, because everything around us is so immediate these days, you know? So it's like teaching people patience, teaching them etiquette, teaching them these different things. It's interesting because both my mom is a professional golfer. So I think that if you watch, and I grew up unfortunately on the side of a golf course, I hate golf. And my dad was also an amazing golfer. My brother's a golfer, and we live on a golf course. And so I spent so many hours, years of my life on the side of a golf course watching them. And the only thing I will say that I observed really from it that I took away is like, it's like etiquette. So like manners, golf has very strict etiquette, but patience and discipline, and really watching that and like such a commitment to a craft. And I think that was what I tried to take away into like anything that I decided I was going to go do, as long as it definitely wasn't golf.
That's really funny. I grew up in I grew up in the place where golf first came to the United States, South Carolina. I think like literally the first golf course in the United States was in South Carolina. Golf is a huge thing where I'm from. It's like even the most sort of low level socioeconomic people you will see them out there spending money playing golf, and there's really, really bad courses, but there are courses all over the place. There's a course for every wallet in South Carolina. And it's, I mean, it's a stereotype of doing business and that sort of thing, but never played game golf in my life. Always hated it. Couldn't stand the thought of it. Like you go and you carry this heavy bag of things to do this like tiny little thing that's really hard to do. And I never understood the point. So I can a little bit, I can relate to you, but I find it really interesting. You like, it was your fitness journey from a young age, like a rebellion against that incredibly boring experience?
I always thought that, but I loved team sport at school. I was obsessed, like joined as many teams as possible until my dad was like, "All right, okay, we can't go to all these practices and all these games and do everything." I also learned, the more teams you join, maybe like more school you could get out of because you would have special things on. But once you leave high school, a lot of the time, and especially in New Zealand, like it's not like crazy like college sport like in America or anything. So you really all of a sudden this huge part of your life disappears. And I had started going to the gym in my second to last year of school because I had a really big knee surgery at 15. And so I got into the gym and I was like, yeah, gym's pretty weird. I was like, it's just like, I didn't really like get what the vibe was about. And then after a few months of it, I was like, gym's pretty cool. I'm like kind of into it. Super strange vibe here. Like, I don't know anyone, like no one else is my age, but like, I wanted to really rehab my knee properly because I wanted to have a lot of other athletic endeavors in my life. And it's funny because I think just from observing so much in the gym, I realized there was a lot of community in there. So once I went to university, I just got like pretty obsessed with going to the gym because I was missing that community factor of like team sport. But I never ever wanted to be a trainer. And the way that I ended up falling into being a trainer was like pitching it as like a brand marketing exercise around this, high intensity and stuff. And then people were like, well, like it should be you. Like you're always in the gym, like you love it, like you're telling us this idea for it. And I was like, oh no, it's not going to be me. I'm not going to do that. And then before I knew it, my friend and I had been trained up to be trainers, and we were doing it on the side of as a brand manager at a fitness company. And I was like, I don't know, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm having a crisis. It's not even a quarter life crisis. I'm like 22. Like, what is happening? And then the irony was like my dream had always been to work for Nike. I'd loved Nike since I was a kid. Like I was a super fan, like crazy. And that was how Nike found me, was doing my like other job, like teaching in the gym, something I never wanted to do. And it's kind of bizarre. It's become my whole career, really. and a dominant part of my career when it was something I didn't want to do. But then the more that I did it, I was like, oh, there's so much opportunity here to reshape the way that this industry is. What always annoyed me originally about the fitness industry was I thought that it was really cringe and tacky, and I didn't think that they spoke to young people very well. And I wanted to capture all these young people that were coming out and like maybe going to fall out of sport and possibly pick up like unhealthy habits, right? Or I wanted to get the busy moms or dads, or people that just like felt like their body was falling. I was like, there's got to be a better way for us to have people in the gym and talk to them and make programming more exciting. And now it's funny because the fitness industry is so big and the wellness industry is worth trillions of dollars. But if I really look at if I think it's got that much better, I think in ways it has got worse. It is so obsessed about how it looks and stuff. And I'm like, man, can it just really be about how it feels? Are we making people more well? Like, are we actually making them more well? Like, and people are harder than ever on themselves about how they feel about their body. So I think, unfortunately, I won't be retiring anytime soon. So my hard workouts will continue, but like the mission is still really the same. It's about trying to get people to not fall in love with the gym per se. It's like just to fall in love with that concept of taking care of themselves and being a bit better to their body. Doesn't have to be obsessive, but making better decisions around it so they can live a better life. They can make better decisions. They feel better in their work. But yeah, it was just kind of an ironic way that I ended up getting there. So maybe slight rebellion against the golf because I went into high intensity, which is a complete different pace. But yeah.
So that leads me to a question I want to ask you. But first, I want to extract a life lesson from your story. I kind of am I have like a sickness with doing this for some of our younger people that listen, or anybody really that doesn't know which way they're going in life. But you found your path in a way that is deeply meaningful and symbolic, because the road that you rejected is the one you ended up taking to find glory. And that is something that happens to a lot of people, if not most people, but people who are really driven and they have something inside of them and they want to accomplish things. I assure you, younger people who are listening to this, you are going to look at so many things in life and think, oh, I hate that. I don't want to, that's not for me. I'm trying to do this other thing. Don't tell me I need to do this thing. It's almost a cliche, but the reality is that so often in life, you're going to wind up doing that thing that you thought you didn't want to do, that you thought was the worst thing in the world, but that path will take you where you want to go because that's what you're called to do. So that's an important lesson, I think.
It was. And I think what was interesting about it too was it was like, I always like had wanted to be, I thought my dream job was I wanted to be a brand manager at Nike. And here I was as a brand manager at a different company in fitness and working for Nike as a trainer, which was not like, and for other brands as a trainer. And I was like, oh, that's just so interesting. And there came a crossroad in my career where the company I worked for said, they were doing a deal with a Nike competitor and they said I had to sign with this other brand for 5 years and leave Nike. And I was like, no, like I can't, I doesn't feel right. Like I don't want to do that. And their advice to me was they're like, you're going to go nowhere with Nike. And I said, but I just might. And like, I owe it to myself to find out, because I'd started to hop on that train, of like you say, like the right path that I was going on. And I remember at the time people like, dude, you are just going into risky decision to risky decision. And the craziest thing was a year later, I was the face of Nike Woman, like this young girl from New Zealand, thick accent. And I truly believe that got accelerated me getting there because someone told me that it wasn't going to happen. And I chose to respond by saying, but it just might. And then my little brain was like, oh, we're going to prove a point now and let's go for it. So I always say to people, I'm like, you got to be really careful what you think. And you got to be really careful what you're saying to yourself. And I know we read that all the time and stuff, and it can just seem like more of this woo-woo things, but it's so true. Like your internal dialogue is got to be on point. You got to remember these little things, even if it sounds so crazy that you're like, yeah, like I want to do that. And I want to be that. And something I always loved about growing up in New Zealand is because it's so far away and we don't have everything there. And especially growing up in the countryside, I had all this vast space to visualize. So visualization is my biggest secret, I think, of how I get what I want, because I use a very vivid imagination, and not in a ludicrous way. By the way, I never imagine anything to do with wealth or money, or it's always to do with like a feeling that I want to get, or like something I really desire that I want to create or do. And it always happens when I really focus on it. So I use visualization a lot, even with my clients when they're on an incline run on the treadmill. I'll be thinking of you now every time I make people do that. But that would be some of my biggest advice too for people. I was like, there's always an invitation for you to like have your mindset going. I don't care if people tell you it's not going to happen. Like if you really want it, you're going to go do it. Like, and it doesn't happen all the time straight away. And there's usually a lot of interesting and annoying adventures along the way to getting what you want. But first and foremost, you got to believe it. And then you got to act in the right direction.
Absolutely. And the idea of visualization and manifesting, I mean, there are buzzwords in a lot of ways with the way culture has developed online, but the thing of it is there's absolute truth to that. And there's absolute truth to it, but at the same time, it's not a magic incantation. It's not something, it's not, it seems very mystical. And certainly it is a little bit of mysticalness in everything we do when things work out. But the truth is that the way you make that visualization happen is by putting in a lot of work also. You have to know that you may be able to draw that opportunity out of the universe in some mysterious way, but you have to know deep down in the bottom of your stomach that you've done everything you can to prepare yourself to seize that opportunity. And that's the part nobody ever talks about when they say, manifesting. They don't ever
Yeah.
talk about that hard part.
Yeah. Well, you have to be prepared, right? Like, because I also think about that all the time. I'm like, I never want to be given something that I didn't deserve or that I wasn't ready for. Like, and I don't want to be given it because I didn't deserve to be there. Like, I want to have worked for it ideally. And I used to do a lot of when I was younger, I always used to imagine I was in second place on something, because you're always a lot hungrier than if you're in first place, right? So my mindset was always like, I'm second, and I'm chasing someone. And it never had a face. I never used like, but it's like, I'm second, and I've got this like really hungry mentality, and I want to work, and I want to understand, and I want to be the best, and I want to keep like crafting myself, because there's nothing worse when you get thrown into an opportunity and you're like, I am like, I'm over my head. Like, I don't know, I wasn't ready, which we see happen a lot when people maybe, haven't done the work. The work is my favorite part. The end result is, well, whatever. But the work is when you're in the shit and you're like, this stuff's happening everywhere. I love that part. I'm like, oh, it's chaos in here.
Absolutely. And that's we talk to a lot of people who are high performing people who have found success in doing things that are very difficult. And it's something that recurs in a lot of conversations that they're they're driven by their passion for that thing. That passion is what picks them up when they need it. And I think that I've seen a lot in both as a teacher, but also having responded to a lot of people in social media at this point, is that particularly young people, but again, anybody, they're going to respond by saying, "What is my passion? I don't know what to do." Like you found it. I hate you. You found it. What do I do? How to do it? And you made such a great point. I think that I think the answer I'm going to give today to that is think about something you can't stand being second place in. It's got to be something that consumes you. There's something out there. It is. I promise there's something out
Ooh.
there. Even if you weren't born in an athlete's body, even if you don't have like some super high IQ that's going to let you go out and, win a Nobel Prize or whatever, you've got something, and there's something out there that you can't stand being second place in. You gotta look and think and reflect. You'll find it.
I think that's such good advice.
Well, I owe all of the credit to you. So that's
No, you don't. But like, you spun it in a better way to help people find their passion. Because I do, that you're exactly right. It's a huge question that comes up. And if you'd asked me what my passion was or what I thought my career was going to be when I was 20, I was probably going to tell you that I was going to work in marketing or finance. And I'm definitely not.
So I wanted to come back to a question I've kind of had in the back of my mind since you've been talking about different stuff. Um, I'm really curious. You've kind of done the same thing with lots of different people over a long period of time. So I want to access your data. Do you see a noticeable transformation in people when you have gotten them to go that extra 10 seconds long enough?
Yeah, because my voice sits in their head and then they apply that behavior and that rule to other things that they do. And I know this because I have a client who I haven't personally trained in a few years because I used to live in New York and I moved to LA, and she'll message me every other week and she'll be like, "You were in my head today. I was thinking about like not doing XYZ and I just thought about you and I thought about those eyes on me." And like I really notice, and like I just hope that anyone that's listening to us the next time, even if it's 10 seconds, it doesn't have to be of exercise. It could be anything. It could even be taking that 10-second pause, that we're meant to take when you're really pissed off and you want to fire back with something, because it's so beautiful what it gives to you. It's like almost like a control element. It's drive. It's yeah. And I notice it's all about mindset. It's less aesthetic that you notice it. It's truly just developing someone's mindset and putting them in the right place to be taking the best steps forward on their own when they're not with you.
Yeah, well, like we were saying earlier, so much of our response to things in life is man, when you're having a hot take, it's coming from so many other places than you. It
Yeah.
really is. And we're so fast now. We're so fast with the way we respond, and we're programmed to think in certain ways and react to certain things. And that 10 seconds, what you're going to get in that 10 seconds is back to yourself,
Yeah.
regardless of what the situation is, whether you need to dial it down or dial it up in that 10 seconds, you're getting in touch with yourself. And every single time you do that, you're getting stronger. It does count, and it grows exponentially as well. I mean, it can't be overstated.
I'm known for if I'm in a fight, sometimes it's like if you live with a partner or something like that, you'll face hard situations or something, and I'm known for being like, I want to take a lap. Like I'll often want to leave a conversation, go for a walk and come back, and you can't always do that, right? So in my head I'm like, I'm taking a lap. I've got 10 seconds and I'm taking a lap to like figure out how I would like to communicate in this moment. Because usually you learn from snapping back quickly and you're like, oh, that didn't feel good.
Well, if you're lucky, you learn from snapping back quickly. It can take a
Yeah.
lifetime for some of us.
Yeah. I think my brother doesn't quite learn, but
Well, that's okay. We need the people to sometimes we learn from others' mistakes, and we need those folks out there too helping us out. So let's be thankful for your brother.
yeah.
I had another question that popped up earlier. This one's a little bit more complicated. Hopefully I can sum it up easily, but you talked about, well, first, let me not bury myself in a hole of speculation. I would like to ask you, what do you think motivates most of those 18 to 20-year-old clients? Why are they coming to you? Like, why are they seeking you out super duper hard ass? Why are they looking for you?
I think at first they come for an aesthetic goal, right? They think, oh, she worked on this person, their body looks like XYZ. I want to look like that. And then what they realize is, by the way, whenever I start working with someone, it's not an audition, but I do an intro session to make sure it's an energy match, because I need to make sure, like, if I'm going to really care about you as much as I care about people, like we're going to be spending a lot of time together and this has got to work. And so I think what they figure out pretty quickly is, and what most of my clients will say, they're like, I've never had someone that cared about me like this much in so many different regards, and attaching my goals so beyond, like, yes, the aesthetic goal I've got is here, but you're like attaching it to all these other different work things. And it's insane because especially in the fitness industry, there's so many options and retention often isn't a really high thing. And I have really good relationships and retention with my clients because it's the relationship goes so far beyond the gym, and the work we're doing in the gym is ideally then the other 23 hours of the day, hopefully the sleeping aid of them, is, really setting them up for that. So I think they come in with the mindset of being like, I want to work with her because I think she's going to make my body look how it is. But then I think it turns into, she makes me feel really good, just overall.
And do you think that desire to shape their body for where you are located is that a professional demand for a lot of these people, or is it
Yeah,
mostly
I
just
mean,
wanting to look good in general, or
yeah, and I think like Los Angeles is a very like aesthetic driven city, but I also used to live in New York, and like, I train a lot of like girls that are in there. I train men as well, but it's like they're pop stars or they're models or they're actresses, and it's so they're very in the spotlight. Their body is very much just as part of, as much of a tool if they're acting or they're performing as anything else. And I think it's also important just confidence wise. You want to feel good, you want to feel like you're coming correct. I mean, working with actresses is always amazing because they're, when they have to tweak themselves for a different role and they're getting ready for a certain character, and they might all of a sudden be like, I'm going to be doing a lot of fighting in this movie, or like I'm a track star, or I'm this. And it's really fun to get into that character with them and prepare. But then you have other clients where it's like, I kind of just need to feel good all the time and fit and healthy. Like, working with a pop star is crazy because they have to be able to perform for 2 hours and do 100 shows of that, like over and over again, and so that's also really fun because you're working a lot on endurance, but also keeping them accountable to their goals, making sure they're having fun, making sure, um, but then I love having my group workouts where I speak to everyone because personal training is personal. It's just for that person. And so whenever I teach a group workout, I try and think, how can I make every person in this room feel like there is a personal moment directly targeted at them in this workout, whether or not it's in person or they're watching through a video. So that's why I always think the words you use are super important. And I don't plan what I'm going to say. I never do. Even if we film for Nike, I have no idea, and I don't watch the workouts afterwards. So people will be like, I love when you said this thing. And I'm like, what did I say? Because I let the emotion come out and what I'm feeling when I teach the workout or what I see when I'm in a room with people.
totally. Well, I think that one of the big recurring themes I'm seeing in as you reveal more about yourself and your life story and just it's palpable in talking to you is authenticity. You strike me as an incredibly authentic person, and that is I don't want to be cynical and say that we're lacking in that because of social media, which is becoming a stereotypical response that I have, but it's one thing is certain, it is addicting. When you encounter somebody and you know you're getting the real person, we're drawn to those people, even if that real person you're getting is, ornery or whatever, a little bit salty. We're still drawn to that because it instills trust regardless. And we are inclined to put ourselves in situations where we have some degree of certainty of what's about to happen. But with somebody such as you, that trust is probably a big part of what's necessary for that person to succeed. They've probably got to trust you a whole bunch because it's not like you said, it's not going to be the first 5 minutes. Everything works out great. It's a process that they've got to stick with, and they have to come in saying, okay, I'm going to stick with this and it's going to go the way she said it's
Yeah.
going to go. And that authenticity is probably the most important ingredient to establishing that trust.
Yeah, it's a huge, like, it's in very much a reciprocal relationship, right? Because it's like they have to initially trust you and then you have to trust them that they're going to meet you. And one thing I noticed too is like being, you can lead the tone, right? Like I always try and think when I reply to anyone on text message or something, instead of like, oh yeah, maybe I'll come or blah blah, I'm like, I'll be there. I try and be direct because I want to, like, I think so much of the way things go these days, especially like moving from New York to LA, people here are so wishy-washy. Like, yeah, I'll pull up. They never go, or whatever. Like, let's hang out. They never do. Like, whereas in New York, you follow through on what you say. So I always try and let people know, like, hey, we're gonna get this, and this is what it's gonna take, and being really assertive on, because it's not just about reassurance, but it's like almost like you're honoring a commitment together. Like, yeah, we're going to do this. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, yo, I don't want to be in the gym anymore at 5:30 or 6 in the morning. But if my client is on a certain role and that's the only time we can train, and they ask me, or their assistant asks me, like, can you do 6 a.m.? I'm like, I'll be there. Like I don't write that, oh, well, like it's just, it's a commitment. And it helps their mindset just as much as it helps mine to be like, okay, I'm still committed to my craft. I still give. And that's a big thing for me. I've always said, like, the moment that I'm not in this mindset, I shouldn't have the job that I have, and someone else should have it, and it will be their turn. Cause I don't want to, like, there's nothing worse, the feeling of when you can tell, I think, especially when people are when it's to do with your body, it's to do with confidence, and you can tell someone like doesn't really want to be there and they're a bit aggravated. And like I see it all the time with some trainers in the gym, no disrespect, but I'm like, your focus is anywhere but on your client. And that's not fair.
So is that one of the big challenges for you as a professional to, I mean, we all got personal lives. We all have days where we wake up and relationship issue or financial issue, whatever, these things happen to us and it strikes us really deep at the core of who we are. Nobody's immune to that. No, there's no level of success or wealth that will make a person immune to that. Is that one of your great challenges as a high performing professional, to be able to cope with those things and still perform?
For sure. Like, I think of a few really key moments, and it's like, I love elderly people. I love them. I'm obsessed with them. I think they're so cute. I think they have so many funny stories. I kind of love when they're a little bit cranky. And I remember having to teach a workout the day that my grandfather died, and I had to teach in the afternoon, and it was too late to get someone to cover the class. And I was like, oh, I could just like I could just not show up. And I was like, oh, but I love that class. And I love all those people that come. And I was like, you know what? These people work out with me like 4 or 5 times a week. Like, if I can't be a bit upset in front of them, like, then I'm not actually being authentic. So I remember going and teaching the class, and I just told everyone, I was like, guys, I'm really sorry. I'm a little bit upset today. Like, my grandfather passed away. So I was like, it would only be appropriate if you gave it everything, excuse my language, in this workout today, because I'm like, and everyone was like, oh, like, because it was very vulnerable, and just to say it. And I remember being so happy that I turned up and taught that class, because I actually felt so much better than if I hadn't gone and just stayed at home, because it, like, being around that community, like, made me feel a lot better in that moment. And what's ironic is the same thing happened to me after my grandmother died. I had to teach in a class an hour later in the rain outside. So at least it was in the rain. No one could tell I was crying, but it's kind of about, it's not putting it aside and it's not compartmentalizing, but it's remembering that if you've created a good community, that community is also there for you, and you should be able to, like, be honest with them and lean on them a little bit. But I never want to abandon them. And I think it also then encourages them to show up on a day where they don't feel so good, to be like, you know what, actually I can do something positive for myself. Even if I really don't feel like it at the time, I'm probably going to feel a lot better later on if I go do this now.
Well, I think what you're describing is the process of a healthy externalization of the stress that you're under, because it's really so much in life. It's not necessarily what we do, it's the spirit with which we do it. And a lot of people might have gone to work in that situation as an escape, as a place where they would take the hard thing and push it away and not be processing it, and it would probably be getting worse in whatever dark little corner of their soul that they shoved it away in and didn't give it the attention it deserves. You took the same action, but you didn't do that. You took that thing, that problem, that stress, and you brought it into the light, out into the forefront of the experience. And because of that, that experience helped you heal, made you stronger. It allowed you to connect with other people, probably helped somebody else heal and grow stronger as a result. That's a very, very profound lesson for people to be conscientious of why they make those types of decisions in difficult situations.
Yeah, it's like, that's obviously like a more sadder example or something, then you can just have the general, like, yo, I'm really tired. Sometimes I'm really tired and I'm really sore and I'm jet lagged or something I've landed in, but I need to see my clients the next day and I feel guilty because I've been away. And I always try and take myself out of a mindset of being like, oh, I would just love to sleep in, or I don't want to be there, or and I just think I'm like, I can't wait to see them tomorrow. I can't wait for us to make sure that we're on our goals and that no one's messing around on all these goals we're going to hit. And the more that I create the mindset for myself and hold myself accountable to it, that really helps me even in the moments where I feel tired, where it could be easy to lean into that. Like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go. Like, you know, I also am learning to honor boundaries because I'm a classic overdoer. And so I've had to learn the hard way a few times with burnout and just communicate. But I communicate now a little bit more ahead of time where I'm like, hey guys, tomorrow is my off day and can't wait to see you the day after.
Yeah, the double-edged sword of being a high performer and being successful is that it can be detrimental. Too much of anything is a bad thing. Your story actually, I'm gonna share a personal story that I very rarely share like really super personal stuff with anybody on earth, much less in this particular format. But I never thought about this until you told me your story just now about your granddad. When our book was so I was primary writer for the GFDA book, available at gfda.co, signed copies. Um, when the book was being printed, everything was done. We crossed the finish line, so to speak. We were Fate changed forever for GFDA because that was the moment when Brian looked over at me and said, "Hey, why don't you write something for Instagram?" That was kind of a pivotal moment for where GFDA has gone now and all the people we've been able to reach. When he sent me that text message, he was here in Pennsylvania. I was in South Carolina, sitting at the kitchen table of my mom's house. I was the primary caregiver for my grandmother who was dying from cancer. She had been diagnosed like she had been a smoker her whole life, and she had been diagnosed with cancer like I want to say I want to say she was diagnosed in like March or May or something like. Anyway, she was diagnosed and she passed away like a couple months after that, and she just had cancer all over the place, and she decided not to get treatment. And so I'd come down to see her, and she had we couldn't get a nurse. There was like a nursing shortage at that time. My mom and my stepdad couldn't find a nurse, and they were like, we don't know what to do, and there were family problems. And I was like, well, I'll just, I'll take care of her. I mean, my job is on the internet, and there's not a whole lot of it happening at the moment. And so I'll take care of her. And so during the day, I, you know, I went from helping my grandmother get up out of the bed in the morning to, picking her up and carrying her to the bathroom and that sort of thing. Like I was her physical body at a certain point, and even beyond that, like when she was watching somebody die from cancer is terribly inhumane because you literally see the human being leave them and they just become a breathing corpse basically. And so at the very end, I was like injecting morphine like with a syringe into her open mouth, And my grandmother loved me a lot. Like I always tell people, I'm from the South, and everybody in the South's a little bit religious. And for my grandmother, who was very, very religious, as all Southern grandmothers are, there was like the hierarchy of human beings on earth are like there's Jesus Christ, there's Jason Richburg, and there's everybody else on earth when it came to my grandmother. And I'm sorry for any of my like cousins and stuff that are hearing that, but um, and first and second place, pretty close. So my grandmother loved me a whole lot, and I was with her in that experience, and that's when I started writing really seriously for GFDA. And I probably put so much stuff into that at that time that I swear to you, I've never thought about that until this exact moment when you told me that story about your grandfather. So thank you for that revelation that little gift of the process here of having a podcast. That was very,
Well, thank
insightful.
you for those posts because I've been following you guys since the beginning. And I know, not to say raw, but like there was so much emotion, I feel like embedded in the words used in a direct way that it's interesting getting that context of what was going on in your life when you were writing those posts.
Whatever you do in life, do it with your whole heart. It's a cliche. It's the truth. It's the absolute truth. And you got to do that because you got, it's such a limited, the more you give yourself to what you're doing in life, the more you have a realization that your time's limited and you got to do your best. It builds. The more success you have, the more you realize you're far away from the real success that you want. And you get it when you become really successful at something, you kind of get like this sense of like, oh, how many years is it going to take me to get to the peak of my performance? How many years is it going to take me to accomplish this, to grow the business, to refine my art? When you practice something for 10 years, you get a really clear sense of like, yeah, I've come so far. Things that I thought were impossible, I can now do with ease. And that's an incredibly rewarding experience. But the other thing you begin to see is I'm so far away. And as good as I've gotten, I'm so far away from what I really want. And you start now, start right now, start today, this very minute, stop this podcast, get up off your ass, unless you're in a car, and stay on your ass for a little while longer, and go do whatever the thing is. Hear me right now, human beings of Earth. Whatever that thing is on your mind, go do it right now because the clock's a ticking. I'm sorry if that's toxic and it stresses you out. Go do it anyway.
I love it. Go do it right now, though, guys. Seriously.
I have another question that's sort of been in the back of my head since you've been talking. We talk about mindset a lot, talk about transformation. It's when somebody's coming to you, like you said something really profound, and I'm not going to be able to word it exactly the same way, so I apologize. But you talk about how changing your body is not effective for what you want out of life unless you change your mind also. And I think that it's got to be true that a large portion of people, if not the majority of people, choose to get physically fit because they want to be more attractive to potential mates.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly with younger people, I think that it's so important for them to think like, for them to realize that being attractive to other people starts between your ears. It starts between your ears. There are people who are so far away from the whatever our typical span, like the wide part of the bell curve for what we consider to be physically attractive. Like there are so many people who are so far away from that and they are irresistible. They are irresistible to other people because it's their outlook on life. It's a way they affect other people. It's their authenticity a lot of the time. And so I really I'd like to emphasize that you got to look inward and you got to find that authenticity inside of yourself if you really want to accomplish that goal of being an attractive person. And no matter how much you shape your body, you will be it's going to probably add to your stress if you go through all of that trouble to shape your body and you don't really start getting to the thing that matters the most.
Well, it's an emptiness. And you'll see a lot of people like you can feel it, when you're around people where you're like, hello, like, like, is there anything there? And I always reference to people when they speak to me about their goals. I'm like, I can tell you, even when my body looked the best in certain times in my career, I was not happier. I'm like, if anything, I was like, I had no relationship with myself because I was so burnt out. I was doing, so many different things to work and this and this and this. But I was like, it's really important context for me to remember because I think a lot of people we have guilt or regret, like we look back on the past a lot, we compare ourselves to previous versions of ourselves, but we don't we do it physically. We don't often remember to look energetically, where were we at that time? And if I do that, if I just looked physically, I could be like, oh my gosh, my abs, my legs, like da da da, my body fat was super low. Energetically, no. Like always on, doing my job, doing everything, but inside, did I feel good about myself? No. And did I feel happy? Did I feel really fulfilled? No, I felt motivated and I felt really driven. And maybe I felt outwardly confident, but I didn't feel a lot of these other things that I wanted that come from being good to yourself, like looking after yourself. And, I aesthetic is always going to be attached to someone's usual motivation to go to the gym. But I think as long as you have like you need to have other goals in your life, and they should be more important than the aesthetic goal that you have. But yeah, there is no point in having an amazing body without an amazing mind or a beautiful personality or some kindness or something, because like pretty people get boring real quick, if there's nothing else to it.
Kirsty, what do you consider to be your greatest success in life?
The way I show up for other people.
Man, you answered that question so much faster than anybody else has. That's supposed to be a gotcha question. How about this? In throughout your whole life, personally, professionally, anything, what's the most difficult thing you've ever done?
Self-rehabbed my brother. And it made me the most patient and amazing trainer that I am today.
I'm certain that is an experience that requires a healthy mindset, more than a lot of emotions probably tied up in that.
A lot of boundaries, a lot of discipline. Like people are always like, wow, you have the most amazing discipline. I'm like, oh yeah, I had a doozy of an early 20s, like, and not like my life, So it's like something I honestly never talk about. But it was in a weird way from such a dark thing. It really was, it crafted me, I think, into something, a different form of myself, like still me, but into a different thing. And I think it's probably one of the main reasons I got into the industry that I'm in.
What's your relationship like with him now?
I love my brother. Like we're so different, but we're the same in some other ways. But he still annoys me, and I'm still left on his case.
Well, that sounds like what the relationship is supposed to be then between siblings.
Yeah.
Kirsty, your story to me, what comes to mind is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. You talked about just introduced us to this deeply personal and challenging experience that you've had. You talk about having to perform at your best for other people. You talk about finding your own path through life, which is the path you desperately tried to turn away from and found out you went in a circle and wound right back up on that path. And you talked about how you send a text message, how you show up somewhere, mindset you have when you show up for work on a hard day. That is such an important lesson. It changes you so much when you when you finally come to the realization that there's a little voice inside of you that is telling you to avoid something when you send that text message. There's a little voice saying, like, is a little the shadow side of your personality that is telling you to react to some deep down buried shit in the way you reply to a text message. And it's the same voice that's getting in the way when you need to do the most important things in life. And it's true for everybody. And it's when you are able to get to the place where you're able to address that voice in the way you send the text message, you're winning the game. And I think that is such an important lesson for people. And I know a lot of people are going to be grateful that you've been able to share that insight with them.
Thank you. They just got to visualize taking a lap when they send their text message. Take the lap, guys. You can always use the backspace. Try not to
Well,
use the edit function because they might have already seen your message. So try and write it first the right time.
right. Yeah. You find your 10 seconds, take your lap, unless, you're like me and the idea of taking a lap is going to cause a little bit of a PTSD moment, but metaphorically take your lap, give yourself those few seconds, remember who you are, do it the right way.
Yeah.
That's the lesson. Kirsty, I'm so sincerely grateful for you, or grateful to you, for sharing your time with us, sharing your stories. I know you've motivated a lot of people today. So, thank you.
And thank you so much, because I've definitely shared many of your posts as motivation to my followers and for myself. So words are really important. So I hope you keep writing.
Well, I'm incredibly humbled by that, and I'm really grateful that I've had the opportunity to connect with you on that level through doing what I love, and it has connected with you doing what you love, and there's some positive stuff happening right there in the universe if anybody's having a bad day. So, everybody, thank you so much for listening to us. It's been a pleasure as always, and we will talk to you next time.